Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Inky Thoughts podcast. Today is gonna be another kind of nerdy that I'm actually not too good at myself. Despite looking like I could read math books for fun, I am nowhere near the level of my guest today. I've actually not done maths for I think almost two decades by now. But my guest today, you do not have to be a maths nerd to know who he is. Think it helps though. But he is a very charming fellow I met at a conference in London last year, I think it was. Tom will be able to back me up on that in a bit. But we met at a tattoo research conference and we nerded out about ink and our shared love of nerdy tattoos. His being both a bit on the math side and a bit on one we share, the nerdier video game and comic book side. But before I give it too much away, Tom, will you please introduce yourself a bit?
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here. Always fun to talk tattoos. I am Dr. Tom Crawford, if you want my formal title, but obviously I just go by Tom. I teach maths at the University of Oxford, and now also, as of very recently, at the University of Cambridge, because why not? Why stop at one? And alongside teaching maths, I also have a YouTube channel and an online presence across all social media, which is Tom Rocks Maths. I'm almost at 30 million views on YouTube, which is
Mm.
crazy, like
Wow.
actually crazy. I can't even begin to think about what that number means. And I have over 120 tattoos. So I think
I
they're the
mean,
key metrics.
if anybody's gonna keep count even at that amount of tattoos, it's gonna be you. Like, but
Well, I don't know the exact number, right? I did for a while, and then I started booking longer and longer sessions, and we would do three or four at a time. Sometimes we'd be adding to other designs or touching up older designs or, renovating some of so like I find it at some point it just got too confusing. So I need to actually sit down, probably with the help of somebody else, to be honest, and count and like tick them off with a Sharpie on my body so I don't double count and see what
I
the
mean,
actual number is.
it is quite the project and undertaking by now. I get why you would need an assistant because I mean, I've not even seen all of Tom's tattoos, but we were in a I would say a sort of strange situation where we both volunteered to have pictures taken for was it a research project or something like that for a
Yes,
museum in
yeah, it was
London.
like
I don't remember why it
an
was,
art
but
exhibition, yes.
yes,
An art exhibition and research project called
yeah.
Tattooed Academics.
Mm.
Yes, where as Mads says, we were both stood there with our shirts off getting photographed, as you do with someone you've just met an hour ago.
And I, of course, can't shut up, so that probably made Tom the more awkward one in that position, to be honest. But I've seen some of your tattoos, and I know it would be difficult, for example, to count the flags, for example, on one part of your back. Because if you count them all separately, that's already a lot.
Yes, no, no, that's one. That counts as one in
All
the
right.
in the context of the 120-ish that I
Okay.
have, yes.
But you did get them done individually, the flags, as far as remember.
Well, so for reference for people listening, um, half of my back is like a
Mm.
brickwork pattern. So rectangles slightly offset, exactly as you would see in the bricks of a house. And each rectangle is filled with a flag of a country I visited. So what we did was we stenciled on. I think there are currently 68 on there. I do still need to
Wow.
update it as I've been traveling a lot recently. Because this was like this was a project done just after lockdowns and COVID.
Oh, wow.
So
All right.
it's since been updated. Well, it needs to be updated since then, but it took like 2 years, all told.
Yes.
And we stenciled in the 68 rectangles first.
Mm.
That was like the first session. Then in the second session, my artist sort of did the gray outline of all
All
of
right.
um, the detail within the flags. So if it was like three stripes, like France, then he would just
Mm.
do the two vertical lines in a very, very
Yeah.
faint gray, just so he knew later on what was going on. Obviously, for some of them, like Spain, for example, has quite a complicated crest. So they're
Yeah,
relatively
yeah.
small because I have so many. They're reasonably small, like a few centimeters. So we simplified the crest as much as possible. But again, he was getting the shape of it would be grayed in. So that was session two, doing all the graying in of all of the
Mm.
the outlines. And then sessions three through to like eight. were doing different colors. So we started off by doing all of the reds, and then it was the
I
blues,
was
and then it
about
was
to
like the
ask if you
greens
like
and
did them
yellows.
so because we Denmark, the one you have from my country, that's quite an easy one. That's done in 2 sessions.
Yeah, well, no, because I think white was one of the last colors we did
Oh,
actually.
right,
So
right.
it might not have been, it possibly wasn't finished until
I
quite
mean, with the
late.
skin tone we
Uh,
share, that you didn't really need the
yeah,
white at the end, to be honest.
that's true. That's true. Yes. No, we did do the white, I think,
Oh yeah.
because I have a couple of other, like my Pokeball, for example, on my arm.
Mm,
We also did the white. And
yeah.
whilst at a glance, you can't tell. If I look very closely, you can. So at least to
No,
me, I feel like most of the
I mean,
people you can't tell, but to me, I can tell it's white.
I'm mainly really joking. I've had tattoos with a lot of highlights and white in them as well, but there are just
Yeah.
some times where you get the joke from the tattoo artist where it's like, damn, I mean, you can barely fucking see this highlight. Where the fuck did
Yeah.
it?
Yes. No, it's very true. It's very true.
But I'm wondering, Tom. Now you've been I actually never spoke with you about this. I don't know how long your academic career has been, but I do wonder, did you start getting tattoos before you went into academia at all, or did that come
So I
later?
did. I got no, very good question. I had my first tattoo done when I was 19, so when I was a
Okay.
student. And then I got maybe one or two more during my undergrad. And then when I started my PhD, I got maybe three or four done over that 4 year period.
Okay.
So I finished my PhD at the end of 2016, so 8 years ago.
Okay.
So at the end of my PhD, I would say I had maybe seven or eight tattoos.
The escalation has been massive over the
Yes.
last 8 years.
So guess what happened? I got an actual job that pays me an
Mm.
actual salary, so I could afford to go and book 6 hour sessions every few months and spend
I
all my
mean,
income on tattoos.
that's
So I think
fantastic,
that,
to be honest.
yeah, looking back, I think that I never, to be honest, I never, as a PhD student or even undergraduate student, I don't remember a situation where I wanted a tattoo and couldn't afford it. As
Okay,
in,
no.
but I feel like maybe there was something in my mind perhaps when
Mm.
I then got disposable income and I was thinking, how should I spend my disposable income on things I enjoy? And maybe tattooing came into it in that sense. I don't think there's no clear, like,
No,
definitive
no.
change that happened. But I think just the trend in, since I actually got a job and had disposable income, I have absolutely massively
Mm.
grown the number of tattoos I have. I also think, for me, I found it quite maybe therapeutic is the wrong word, but
Mm.
something like that. Sort of as we were coming out of lockdowns and COVID.
Mm.
So once you were able to actually go and get tattooed again, because the rules
Mm.
changed so much in that 2 year
Oh yeah,
period of like
absolutely,
could or
absolutely.
couldn't. So at the various points when you could, I would like immediately message my artist and be like, "Can we do a full day session?" And so I ended up going almost once a month, perhaps for like almost a year. I think. I
That's
think
the
we did like
dream, to be honest.
10 sessions. Yeah, I think we literally did like 10 sessions over 12 months because I was just,
Wow.
I don't know. It just maybe it was again, it wasn't a conscious thought I had, but
No, no.
thinking back, maybe it was one of the ways that I was like dealing with everything that had happened around COVID and
Mm.
lockdowns. Everyone had lots of things going on and lots of ways that they sort of coped with that. And I do wonder now whether, as we were coming out of it, getting all of my tattoos and feeling maybe creative, maybe taking ownership in that way,
Mm.
in some sense, maybe helped with what processing that whole sort of lockdown experience. Um,
I mean, I
but
think
yeah,
there's
so then
something
it's
to
sort of, and
that.
then now I probably go, hmm,
There's something to that because I think a lot of people, when you're forced into sort of like not having anything else to really do, or at least things slow down to such an extent, there's also almost an enforced self-reflection to some extent. And I think a lot of
yeah,
people,
no,
not
absolutely,
necessarily in a really active way. I'm not talking that everybody just sits there. Who am I? Like trying to look like a Greek
yeah,
statue. But there is a bit more of that. So I think a lot of people do sort of figure out well, I actually want more tattoos. Like actually it's the same thing that is sort of an escalated version almost of what happens to a lot of people when they first get a tattoo and they were originally like, I'm just gonna get one or two. And
yes,
then they
yeah,
found
yeah,
out,
yeah, yeah,
wait, I actually like being tattooed. And then they suddenly get, a lot more, and that boundary they might have had originally sort of get pushed. It wasn't a boundary in your case, I don't think, but it was just that you hadn't considered it that much yet, and then suddenly you had a
Yeah.
chance to consider it, and just like, well, yeah, fuck it, let's do this. You know, uh,
And I remember there was a point, it probably was in like 2021, maybe 2022, in fact, maybe early
mm,
2022. I do remember during one of my sessions, because I'm there for like 6 hours, so obviously I talk to
yeah,
my artists about everything and anything.
of course.
And at one point I was like, am I now classed as heavily tattooed? And he was
That
laughing and
line
he
we all
was,
want to cross.
yeah, well, yeah, I don't know. I just the thought came into my head, and he was like laughing. He was like, "Dude, you have been heavily tattooed for a while." In his opinion as an artist, I'm sure everyone has
Yeah. I mean,
their
yeah,
sort of
there's
their own
always a spectrum
line.
to it and all that stuff, and that
Yeah,
and people
but it
have.
was
I mean,
just
you find people in the two world where it's like, oh no, you're heavily tattooed, but it's really like densely covered from the neck down. It's
yeah,
like, yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely, but also before that, I would argue. And then
yes,
if you ask anybody without tattoos, as you, especially in your career path, meet plenty of people that have little to no tattoos, they would say you've been heavily tattooed for years. Like they might have thought you were already coming out of your postgrad.
yeah. Yeah, no, I think so. Yes. No, it is very interesting seeing some of the photos, or even some of my old videos, in
Mm.
fact, when I started doing Tom Rock's Maths back in, late 2017, early 2018, and then seeing some of those photos when my arms are bare. It's weird. It's
I mean,
like, because it
I
doesn't feel
had
like
looked
it's
through
that
it both
long
when I
ago.
first got to know you and warming up to the to our interview today. I did look through some of it, and even to me, having only met you as you in person with lots of tattoos and seen you mainly with tattoos, looking back at some of the old ones, like, damn, suddenly he just loses like. Without your face actually hasn't changed much, but somehow just the lack of tattoos makes you seem way younger.
Yes.
No,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you don't. I mean, don't get me wrong. You already look like you're a baby face, especially compared to a marker like mine. But for some reason, it might be because I've been so into tattoos for many years, just like yourself. When people suddenly go from having lots of tattoos to no tattoos in a picture, they just lose all age and experience in my mind.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense because if you have a lot of tattoos, that has happened over a pretty long period of time.
Exactly.
So it's sort of, I feel like it makes sense that naturally you would associate
I
somebody
do
looking
like how you
slightly
put a
older when they have
usually in there
tattoos.
just to account for how some people might not think
Well, yeah,
it's been
uh, and and the sort of the bare skin has the kind of like,
I do only know
um,
one person that has collected more tattoos in a shorter span of time than you, and that's the ink
oh
shrink
wow.
who I've had on here, who just I think it would add up to way more just because of the sheer insane amount he got done from being like I think it was from he started at 36 really getting into tattoos. He'd had some from when he was like way younger, and then he just
Mhm.
got like from the neck down. There's not an inch left. He was looking for somebody to fill out his thumbs at a
Wow.
convention not too long ago.
Wow. And how
It was
over
like,
what period of time
wow.
was that done then?
I mean, I can't remember his age, and I don't want to call him out as being
Oh,
small.
okay, but
But
okay.
I
Yeah,
mean,
just
I think like a similar period, like an 8 year period, something like that,
right.
eight
Yeah,
or
yeah,
10
okay.
years, and it's
Yeah.
just been
Yeah,
full
yeah. Just
on.
the whole thing.
But
Yes.
I get the same thing.
Um,
Like he's a working psychiatrist and had a good career and a good pay, and suddenly he found out, you know what, I'm really into tattoos, and it's just off to the
this is
races, you
yeah.
know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what
Definitely.
holds you back. I mean, I can speak as a guy who's not always been too lucky with having the economics for getting all the two projects done I want. Like, if I actually really got lucky economically soon, it would also be off to the races. Not just because I've
Okay, yeah.
planned a lot, but also just because, I've always had a plan of wanting to get loads of
Right.
tattoos.
Hmm.
So I absolutely
Yeah,
get that feeling. Like, you won't hear any
I'm
shaming
still
from me at least regarding
yeah.
getting a good
There's
job
no
growing
shaming
up.
here. There's no shaming. I I'm not sure if I would say even now I have a specific plan of
No,
filling spaces or anything. So I know, for example, I don't plan to get anything on my neck.
no.
Um, that's just, I guess, a decision. I mean, that decision could
Yeah.
change in the future, but from sort of there down, I have tattoos pretty much anywhere else.
Mm.
Um, so and it's more that I just continually have ideas for things that I think would make for interesting designs or that would fit in certain spaces and stuff. So as long as I keep having ideas and there's still space to pop them, then I think I will continue to get those tattoos.
Yeah, of
But
course.
to me, it's not. Um, I think it's, yeah. I'm not. It's not like I'm like, because I feel like there's two ways of thinking about it. For me,
Yeah.
it's like I have interesting ideas. I have things that I want to get done, and then let's find a space to put it in. And I feel like an alternative approach, which is obviously just personal preference, is I want my entire like leg covered. So
Yeah.
let's find some cool stuff to fill in my leg. But
That's,
they're
I mean,
like, to
I
me,
couldn't
they're
agree
two very
more. I couldn't
different.
agree more.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm definitely in the first camp of just I have ideas, I have designs, find some cool stuff,
Mm.
see where it would fit,
I probably have to
rather than
surrender to the fact
necessarily.
I'm probably in the other camp because just because
Yeah,
of the fact I
yeah, yeah, no,
so
and
badly
as
want
I
certain
said,
like
yeah,
certain parts, but I do also really plan out like cool design ideas. But man, I often just look at places, feel like no, this needs filling out. Like I don't care what, almost care what goes in. This needs filling out.
yeah, uh-huh.
But
Yeah.
speaking of cool
Maybe I'll
tattoo,
get to
oh
that
sorry,
point, but I was gonna say maybe I'll
yeah.
get to that point. Who knows? We'll see.
I mean, there's plenty of space left. That's the cool thing about the way you get your designs done. Is some of them you've been built on. I was quite fascinated when we were talking of cool tattoo ideas because I can't remember the explanation, and that's probably because my head does not care to retain maths too easily anymore. But I remember you explaining the cross lines you had on your back and what it had to do
Yes.
with mathematics. And I thought that was so cool
Yes.
because you sort of also then built a separate thing into it with sectioning off certain areas of your back with that cross line for certain tattoo
Not
themes.
on purpose, yeah.
No, no, no,
So you can
but
see the arrows there go right
yeah.
down to my hands. So that's like the end. So if I hold my hands out like this, then viewed from the back, there's like an arrow going all the way across the two arms, which is like the
Damn.
X axis of your, imagine your X and Y axis in like the cross shape, the plus sign shape from a graph from like school or something.
I
So
feel like I
that's
should be
like the
taking notes
horizontal
right
bit.
now, to be honest.
So the arm span is the horizontal bit,
That's-
and then the other one starts at the top of my neck and goes all the
hmm.
way down. And we purposefully put it on an angle so that it would go down one of my legs. Otherwise, it would have just gone directly to my
Yeah, that's gonna be.
yeah.
I
So
do
that was
get
not the idea.
the
Yeah,
artistic license you took with that one.
exactly. So we kind of put it on an angle because I wanted it to be as long as possible as well.
Yeah.
So I wanted it to go all the way down my leg. Yeah, so it runs all the way from there, the back of my neck, all the way down to my right. Oops, runs down my
Mm.
right leg. So yeah, so that was it's interesting because that was done. I think that was in 2021,
Mm.
and that's the best way of trying to age my tattoos actually,
Oh.
because well, when we so for example, like I can show you my arm here, right? So it's
Mm.
obviously you see the line. So obviously the Pokeball was there before the line,
Mm.
right? Because the line
Yeah.
stops and then reappears the other side of the Pokeball. But then if you look further up my arm, so you can see the line continues up there. So all of the ones around the line were added after it,
Ah, right. Okay,
right? So
that's
like,
quite clever to be honest. But that's what I meant. Like
yeah,
it's
so
sort of
it's
become accidentally really clever in the way it also divides it up
yeah, I mean,
without ruining the math. Do correct me if I'm wrong. Principle that the other tattoo is
yeah,
based on. To be honest,
yeah.
you have a
So
few maths tattoos, don't you? Like
I do. So most of my right arm has lots of equations
that's
and
the yeah.
things all over here. Yeah, so lots of like mathematical shapes, mathematical equations. Again, that wasn't an original plan. I just happened to get a few mathematical
Uh,
designs and they just ended up being on that arm. But now I've reached the point where if I have a new idea for a design that is a mathematical themed tattoo, then I usually see is there a space it
oh.
can go on this arm at the moment. So I think this one may end up actually getting pretty much filled with equations and
I
numbers
mean,
and
it's
visualizations of
in a
maths
way it's gonna
concepts.
make you look like a Batman villain of some kind, doing all maths
With all of my
equations on
like
one arm,
calculations
which
on my arm, yeah.
I personally think that's absolutely awesome. It is. I always found that it is easier in a way with at least the STEM sciences to often find stuff to tattoo directly taken from the science. It's a bit more abstract, you know. I think in psychology and psychiatry, there may be some drawings and diagrams of certain
Mm,
ideas. For example, older ideas about the id and the ego and stuff like that. You could get tattoos of
yeah.
that. But for example, in my field of sociology, it's very fucking difficult to get a tattoo to do with, oh, diversity. Okay, but that's always going to be how do I depict it?
Yeah,
There's
but
not going to be oh, this thing we all use to depict diversity. Whereas with you, there's a pi sign. Everybody knows the pi sign.
yeah, so I feel like I completely agree. And and I feel like it's interesting that you would think about it in that way, because I'd
Mm.
almost have the opposite viewpoint in the sense of sometimes I want a certain idea or a certain equation, and the only way I can visualize it, like there's not much to me, it doesn't feel like there's much personalization or creativity that I can put into it. So with
It's a
some of them
great
there is.
point.
So, like the lines I have down here are representing an equation. I tried to visualize it through like a, through the
Okay.
lines rather than writing it in terms of numbers. So for some of them, I've been able to come up with creative ways to
Hmm.
represent the maths. But for a lot of them, it's literally like there's an equation. Okay. I mean, I think it looks a pretty cool equation,
It
but
looks. I mean,
nonetheless.
to be honest, it does
Whereas,
look really cool. But I get what you mean. Like that, it is the problem that becomes to try and actually find a illustrated way to symbolize something that's originates in an equation or
yeah,
yeah.
so, just with you were saying about, if you wanted to represent diversity,
Mm.
I actually kind of like the fact that the way you would be representing it in your tattoo is your own personal definition
Yeah.
of diversity. That's kind of,
Well, absolutely. I do love
it's
that
not
too.
okay,
But
it's not as recognizable as like the
no, no,
pi
no, no,
sign,
no, no.
but I feel like it sort of adds that more personal touch, perhaps.
Absolutely.
So I think
But
there's pros and cons to both.
absolutely. But that is that an interesting point you point out as well. That is one thing that sort of gets a little not lost. That's perhaps the bad word to use. I blame my second language skills in English here, but it's an interesting point that there is some personal touch that can get lost sometimes. But then it becomes your personal touch in what equations you want to,
Yeah,
eternalize in your skin
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
what you put together with what in a way. Because I don't imagine you're gonna like that would require an insane level of forethought, I would say, would border on the sociopathic if you would actually make all the equations add up to something you would equal sign at the end.
Well, it's funny you should say that. So there is one here,
Look at that.
which you can like half see. So
Yes.
all of these equations here. So these are Maxwell's equations of electromagnetism here,
Mm, mm,
and we've written them. It's very small, so you can't see very clearly, but they're in two separate groups, and there's a little plus sign because if you take these two groups and then you combine them in such a way, you get these equations, which are the wave equations,
ah.
which was how we kind of how mathematicians were able to do this calculation. So you start from the laws of electromagnetism. So this relationship between electricity and magnetism, studied by Maxwell and lots of other people in the 1800s. Forget the exact date, but they're doing all these experiments. And for example, like electromagnets, the idea that if you spin a magnet, it generates electric current, and vice
Yeah.
versa. Um, so we had those equations, and it was actually the mathematicians who then manipulated those equations by applying mathematical techniques and following how does maths work, how do equations work, and then they got to the wave equation, and so the mathematicians were like, this doesn't really make sense, but our maths is correct. We have taken electromagnetism, electromagnetic fields, and we've shown that they satisfy the wave equation. But anything that satisfies the wave equation is a wave. Therefore, light must be a wave. And the physicists were like,
That's
well, that's not
incredible.
true. The physicists were like, well, that's not true. And the mathematicians were like, well, maybe you should test this. And then they designed that really clever experiment to show that light can behave as a wave as well um, as a particle, depending on the situation. But it was like the mathematicians that sort of, that's why I love that. That's why I got the tattoo, because I just love this idea that by just playing around with the equations. So the physicists give the mathematicians the equations,
Yeah.
the mathematicians do their thing and are like, we think this should be true, even though it's really weird. The maths is telling us this might be true. And obviously, then the physicists have to do the incredibly smart, clever way of testing that.
Yeah.
But the idea was like planted in their head because of the mathematicians. And
It's a
so
cool
I
I've
just
shown how
love.
you can explore an experiment in the STEM sciences as well. Because I think a lot of people,
Mm,
a little pet peeve of mine often is that you often see humanities and social sciences as being soft and like very up for debate all the time. But the same thing people forget happens, especially at your level with STEM sciences. There's also experimenting and
yeah.
exploring and figuring out
Oh,
all sorts of
absolutely.
new things you don't know how works yet. That I mean,
That's
I've heard more than a few scientists talk about how the best position most STEM scientists take is if you don't know anything yet, you think, well, we might later. You don't
yeah. No, no. That's
hate the
to me. That's what
unexplainable. You
science.
enjoy it.
That's what science is in any context.
Absolutely.
It's you ask a question, you hypothesize, what do I think is happening? You come up with a theory, you come up with something, and then your job as a scientist is to figure out how do I test this? And then you have to come up with a correct methodology and everything else to test it. But like that's how we discover anything in any scientific
Absolutely.
subject. Yeah.
But I think that was I'm just so fascinated with that was such a cool story and a beautiful example of that with like, hey, we actually we know what you did here, physicist, but have you tried this? Because this works
Yeah,
in
the
on
maths
our
is
end. So
exactly, exactly. Yeah. So to come back to the original point I was trying to make with that
sorry.
tattoo, the no 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 the two the Maxwell's equations plus the cool maths equals the wave equation. So it is written that way. So they are arranged in such a way to sort of demonstrate that process
Oh, yeah, but
with the
they're not
equations
all
and
chained
visually.
together down the arm. Like you were,
No, no, no,
I
no. The rest
imagine
of
it
them
would
are
be
like pretty random, but
a
yeah,
complete chaotic mess if you ever tried to actually chain together all the equations
yeah.
down your arm.
Yes, yeah, that would be difficult. Yeah, that would
Maybe
be
it would,
difficult.
or accidentally would explain black holes. Who knows? No. But
Maybe.
I'm wondering. I did wonder a bit talking about this that you said you started your tattoos, only a few tattoos throughout your academic career, and Tom Rock's math started a bit before you got really tattooed as well. Did it sort of become a way of sort of anchoring that part of yourself, the rock and roll and sort of alternative thing? Because I know for a fact that we've probably known more than a few people in our respective academic careers where we start out in our undergrads and everybody trying to know who they are. So people are we're all alternative and we hang out at rock bars. And then suddenly you become
Yeah.
adults and academics, and a lot of them just shed their fucking skin almost to become these
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
tweed wearing types and that. Whereas you never did that. I never did that. And we know some others that well, Matt Lauder sort of did that, but in his own way.
Yes. Well, I think no, I think
But
that's actually a really good point that you've made there. Um, I actually, if somebody, because it's just about like personal growth, right? And it's just changing, and I feel like there's nothing wrong with somebody being very alternative, being, as your description, chatting in rock bars and going to gigs and whatever it is and having piercings and tattoos and whatever. And then, growing out of that because
no,
of other influences in their life, other responsibilities. Maybe they now have different friends or there are a whole host of things. So I don't think like that there's anything wrong with that.
no,
If that's just part of your journey, your personal
yeah,
journey and growth and everything
agreed.
else. But I think possibly what you were more referring to are there are some situations where people want to still, that is still them and their
Yeah.
personality, but they feel like they can't express it because of the academic environment they're in.
Well,
And
both
that to
both
me
that
is
and
quite
also that
sad.
both that and also I know times are changing even at places like Oxford and Cambridge, even though they are more storied and in the greater scheme, more conservative than other institutions at times in these regards. But there's also the whole thing with you bucking the trend a bit with like there's a lot of norms also regarding how an academic should look and appear,
Yep.
especially in a teaching context. Where I've tried that at the University of Glasgow, where they didn't give a shit about me having visible tattoos when teaching undergrads, and the undergrads, surprise, surprise, love seeing a tattooed teacher, to be
Yep.
honest. But that's the thing. I bet you've experienced the same as well. That it is enjoyable being yourself when teaching and openly expressing yourself whilst teaching. But there is some, trends and norms still you sort of have to push back against sometimes, I imagine.
No, absolutely. And like I don't know of any um very explicit situations
No, no, no.
where, in fact, I can't think of any where someone has said something or it has affected my work. But I am sure there are people who don't perhaps think it's appropriate. I definitely know from YouTube comments, but I just don't listen to YouTube
Oh,
comments,
yeah,
that people don't think it's
yeah.
right. That, lots of people saying that I shouldn't be teaching students with visible tattoos. But the way I think about it is actually that person is entitled to that opinion, and
Yeah,
I have no, that's fine. Um, it's a personal preference. But for me, imagine if you are a student who is a bit more alternative, or maybe already has a tattoo, and every single person you see in academia does not have visible tattoos. You immediately in your head think you cannot be an academic
yeah.
because you cannot see somebody that, you know, it's this kind of like, I would never claim to be a role model ever because I feel like the word is, um, but like it's just that idea of whatever you as a student are doing or want to do, or, even as a person, if you see somebody else who is sort of like you doing it, you are much more likely to believe it is possible for you to do it. Right? This is
Absolutely.
why
I
it's
mean,
so
representation
important
matters
to
in that way.
exactly.
It's important.
And
It's the
so
same principle as why it's important to see somebody that might be queer or trans or women in
exactly
STEM
that.
and all that. I
Exactly
mean, I
that.
know this is less
Yes.
pressing that, for example, women in STEM. We're not claiming we
Of
have it
course.
worse
No,
than
no, no,
they,
yeah, yeah.
but still, I mean, it's also great for people to see that you can be. I mean, in a broader scope, which as a sociologist, I love broad scopes sometimes, but it's good for students to see in any field that you can be yourself and still achieve academically. Because a lot
Exactly.
of people feel,
Yeah.
because of what they're told by a lot of other voices and pressures within society and their families, all that stuff, that they have to give up on themselves when they grow up and they have to leave all this stuff behind. So it's great to see, a Pokemon loving, tattooed, rock and roll
Yes.
pierced, math professor, and a Star
Yeah.
Wars loving, nerdy, bearded, sociology teacher. It's great to
Yeah.
see because some students, as you say, may feel, well, okay, I can have my tattoos. I can come to class next time and have my arm out if they have, a little a tattoo on the arm and stuff like that. It's great,
Yeah. Yeah. Because I can honestly say at no point have I ever
No,
tried to convince students that they should
no,
get tattoos, or like
no.
that's a whole other thing. That can happen in any context, right? I don't
Yes,
feel like it's not, that is regardless of what you're preaching, let's say.
yes, yes.
That to me is whatever it is that you might be saying, that's a bit suspect as
Yeah.
someone in a position, of potentially a role model or a
You have
position
never
of
tried
like
to recruit new
seniority.
members for the club, so to
Exactly.
speak. No,
That's yeah, I don't
that's,
think yeah, that in any context isn't really like the right
I've
thing,
always been
but it's
happy
just
to
it's
answer
just
questions a student might have regarding tattoos or where I got mine done or any advice I might have, but I'm never gonna be up and be like, you should all get tattoos. Like, try it. Go.
exactly. Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no,
yeah,
no,
no,
no, no, no.
exactly. Yes, exactly that. It's just that, as you say, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said it's just the fact that beyond the tattooed aspect, I am just being me
Yeah,
in
exactly.
an environment where there will be some people who think they cannot be themselves.
Exactly.
So even
Because
if it's
you
nothing
already
to do
started
with
this image.
tattoos,
And in
yeah,
your case, you started this image with Tom Rock's math before, it was very visible with the tattoos and all that. So I think the tattoos have just added to that and perhaps helped you, anchor that part of yourself a bit, and that way you express yourself in public view, you could say, to the
hmm
audience, both online and when teaching and in other academic contexts. But that is still you anchoring something that was already there. You were already Tom Rock's maths. You probably already had that sort of way of being and going about both your academics and yourself and how you wanted to
yeah,
combine the two spheres even before you went into your postgrad or anything like that.
yeah,
Like
hmm
so that's just
absolutely,
helping to anchor that. That's another
yeah,
thing. I'd imagine some people that might either watch this or watch your stuff online, which is much more likely at the moment. But they might think sometimes that, oh, he just did. I imagine some people, hopefully, there haven't been too many in the comments because people can be assholes online, but there's also good people out there, and I do remain positive. But they would say, oh, you did that to get attention or to sort of garner a certain image that's edgy, but that's not what it's about. I mean, I've talked to you on a couple of occasions, and I know for a fact it's much more personal, and it's much more about you figuring out you and what you like.
Yep. Hmm. Yeah,
You
no,
know.
exactly that. It's yeah, and the two, I think it has sort of become a big part of Tom Rock's
Mm.
maths in a way, for sure. But I think it's just because, as you say, because I'm teaching at Oxford and now Cambridge as well, and I'm just not what you would expect
Yeah.
from an academic there. I think that means people are just going to associate that, hopefully in a positive way, most of the time.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so, but it wasn't a case. You're right. Yeah, it definitely wasn't the case that I was like, right, I'm teaching at Oxford. How can I make myself stand out?
Yeah,
Like, kind
exactly.
of thing. It was,
Thank
yeah,
you for simplifying it. That's exactly what I meant. That you didn't go out and say like, okay, now I want to do YouTube. I gotta stand out now
yes,
with teaching us. So let's go get lots of tattoos. That's not how it works.
no, no, no. It was already there. It was already within me. Um, yeah, I think it's just become part of the
Well,
whole branding, let's say, at the moment.
I'd
But
imagine it
it's
was.
but it's me. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
my
mean, it
personality.
looks like a very natural progression when I've looked through, some of your videos throughout that time and watched some of them. That you just figure it out slowly but surely. That, oh yeah, it's actually doing something positive here. That I'm
Hmm.
showing who I am and being myself in these videos
Yeah.
while teaching maths, and then you've just given
Hmm.
more of yourself over time.
Hmm. Yeah. No, definitely. That's something. There was a shift. I think again, it was during kind of COVID and the lockdowns. Um, I think I actually started sharing posts of my tattoos.
Mm.
Because and I think on the very first post, this I haven't read this since I posted it, but it was something like, I said obviously lots of us aren't having a particularly good time or enjoyable time at the moment. So here's just something a little bit different because you might not want to hear about maths all day every day as much as I do. So I just decided, every few days I would share a picture of one of my tattoos and just mention a tiny little bit of the story or the meaning of it. Lots of them are just like, it's my favorite Pokemon or whatever. But I started doing that. And people seem to appreciate like sharing, as you say, a little bit more
Yeah.
of myself and my personality and whatnot, alongside talking about
It's a great way to connect.
maths and
People want
things.
to people
Yeah,
want to talk to people they can connect with and also learn from them.
yeah.
Like how when I saw you I almost scared the shit out of Tom, I think, when I reacted to this tattoo. But I saw some of your video game tattoos on your back, and I was immediately like taken back to my childhood, being like, that's Spyro, that's the guy from
Yeah, yeah,
Medieval.
yeah.
Oh!
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, we were probably playing. I guess we were both playing the same games. I bet when
Absolutely.
we
I've
were
never
growing up.
asked, but I think we're pretty similar in age. So we were probably both around the PS1 and sitting there gaming
Yeah,
those
yeah,
games.
yeah. Absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
And the
Yeah.
N64 and those games as well. I noticed some throwbacks to
So
some
I
of that
never
too.
had
Yeah,
this. This
I
is
never
a
had an
big
N64 either. I
reveal.
played
I
it in
never
youth
had an
clubs. Like,
N64. I had a
neither
Game
have I.
Boy.
But I played it in youth clubs. Like there was
Oh,
this
okay, right.
after school thing where we just all sat there and played Smash Bros. And Mario Kart and that. Never had one myself.
Yeah, no, I did have my Game Boy, play Pokemon and Zelda on my Game Boy
Mm.
Pocket. Obviously, big PS1, PS2, PS3,
Mm.
even. And now have a PS4. Haven't got a 5 yet, but probably will. And then and then it was I did get a Wii. So that's how I
Okay.
got into Mario Kart. I'd never played Mario Kart
Mm.
until I got a Wii. So I'm good at Mario Kart on the Wii, but I'm terrible at it on the
I mean, I
N64.
gotta give it to the Nintendo.
Because
They do know how to make a cozy little console. Because I bought a Switch when I at
yes,
one point, my rig was in the shop when I was living in Scotland. I was like, this is how I unstress, and it was a really stressful time
yeah,
over Christmas, over Christmas, New Year's with both maintaining family stuff and research and all that.
yeah,
So I was just like, I gotta get something to unstress with, and I was an offer on a Switch, and I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna buy that. I'm gonna go to Argos and just.
yeah. Yeah, no, I still play my Switch because I travel a
Oh,
lot,
nice.
lots of train journeys, lots of planes.
Mm.
So the Switch for me, I have a handheld Switch, like the fully integrated handheld one. Um, yeah, it's been had it for like 5 or 6 years. Absolute
I,
love it. Yeah.
I gotta ask, with the talent I've seen you, and I'll call it a talent, I've seen you have for finding maths in everything, because you almost want to think when you see some of your videos, you'd be sitting on a train and immediately going, okay, let's think about how quickly wheels are spinning and how the smoke speed to like going into that much detail. Not even the classic like, okay, when will this arrive when we have this speed? That could be the other version. But I imagine you would even sitting with a Switch sometimes think, oh yeah, I wonder how many polygons I can figure out they have in here with a little equation.
So, okay. Um, I sometimes my brain does that. Absolutely. So
Hmm.
I was on a podcast, The Scientific American, and we were talking very, very general audience, and I was talking about maths being everywhere, and I was
Hmm.
sort of giving this example of I recently climbed a mountain, and I was at the top, and obviously I was loving the views. So, I was
Yes.
nearly 6,000 meters up. It was incredible, but also you could see another mountain peak in the distance, and my
Hmm.
brain just couldn't help itself from thinking how far away is that? Can I estimate its height using trigonometry? Like literally, like I didn't want to think about that, but that's just where my brain went because I think about maths all day, every day. So
I mean, it's brilliant
sometimes it
that you're this
happens.
passionate about your field,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
is
So
also
sometimes
impressive and almost to a scary degree impressive that your mind can just go, huh.
I don't know. Yeah, it's just it's what it's used to. But then for some of the things we mentioned about like my posts where I talk about maths, so
Hmm.
some of those are like that's sometimes it's a similar situation to like the being on top of the mountain, but sometimes it's purposefully I'm like, okay, this is an image or I'm at a cool place that I think will get people's attention, that people will be
Yeah.
interested in. They're scrolling through their feed and they're like, oh cool, that's Tom in at the pyramids or whatever,
Yeah.
cool place I happen to be. But then I think, okay, so I'm going to sort of now I've grabbed their attention. Can I kind of like just slip in a little bit of mathematical thinking or knowledge, just to, I'm not necessarily like trying to teach you something. I'm just trying to
No.
get you to see maths in a different context and
But I think
perhaps be
that's a
less
brilliant
scared
thing
of
to
it.
do because subversively putting things into people context people are more familiar with. I mean, I've
Exactly.
done that.
Exactly that.
It's perhaps sometimes. I mean, you do it in a brilliant way with maths, which I don't think everybody has a great talent for because it's way more difficult. But for example, sociology, it's the same principle as how I always would ask students, well, have you had a think about what I just talked about in this hypothetical? Have you experienced
Yeah.
anything in your life that is similar to that? And people that can find these similarities and sort of put it in a context that they're more familiar with often learn way better. So I think it's
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant. But it is, I do
Yeah.
think that it's also brilliant that you can think like, let's say a new video game came out and you wanted, and you would immediately be like, well, can we do maths on this video game? Can we do
Yeah. Yeah.
something
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
that's also smart. Like,
Yeah. It's sort of one of the things. I get asked about how do you reach people who don't want to engage with maths? And I think this is one way, but what I'm doing there ultimately it all comes under the same kind of uh, way I try to explain it, which is I'm talking about maths in a way that makes sense to my audience.
yes.
And what I mean by that is what are my audience interested in? And then let's talk about the maths of their interest. Whether it's,
Yeah.
the maths of Pokemon, the maths of mountains, the maths of the pyramids, whatever it is, it's something that they are more likely to be interested in than me just saying, let's talk about shapes.
I seem to recall, did
And
you
so
do
I'm
the thing with
bringing,
Titanic and some and the
yes,
ping
the
pong
ping pong
balls? Yeah,
balls.
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
It just
Yes.
came to mind when you said that all these different contexts and that, and then I just remembered,
Yeah,
oh, you did the thing with the model of Titanic and the ping pong balls, which is also fascinating stuff.
exactly.
I'm not even good at maths anymore, but I've personally found some of your videos absolutely incredibly fascinating sometimes. If you could do a Pokemon one as well about how much they would actually weigh or something like that if they were the size they
Yeah,
say in the Pokédexes, which is
exactly.
absolutely
Yeah.
mind-altering stuff. I haven't played Pokemon since there was only 152 of them, but still, it is wild to think about the
Yeah.
proportions how they would actually be if they were real and in the sizes it says.
Yeah, so that again, that's a prime example. Like I gave a talk last weekend on the maths of Pokemon. I'm doing the same talk this weekend, both at like pretty big events in London, and they're
Mhm.
just really popular because
Yes.
you get kids from school who like Pokemon. Maybe they play Pokemon Go, they collect the cards, they play the games on the Switch, whatever it is. And then we just, like you said, we have a laugh. We're like, well, this Pokemon apparently is twice as hot as the sun. That doesn't seem correct. And then you
That
work
is
out how much
that is an
energy.
insane thing to think about, to be honest.
Yeah, like, but again, it's just having, it's, you're having a bit of a laugh with it, but also
Absolutely.
you're kind of I feel like there's an element of like critical thinking
No, absolutely.
built into it.
Thank you. You've actually put words. I was looking for. I don't know how, because I am a critical thinking expert in what I do in sociology, and I somehow slipped the word today. But that's exactly
Yeah,
the thing. I think you teach them as well to sort of be more analytical about stuff they like as well.
exactly that.
Even if you fully ignore the maths, you teach them to look at the world and stuff they're into in a different way, which I think leads to even more innovative thinking from them and critical thinking from them. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
incredible.
don't just accept. Yeah, yeah, that's I never thought about this. This is great. We're both having epiphanies. It's like
Like,
it's teaching critical thinking, it's teaching them to be more analytical and to just not accept something
yeah,
when you're told
at
something,
face
which
value,
again
like
in the modern world, yeah, in the modern world is hugely important.
oh, that was my
So
main
it's
thing I
kind of
taught. I know it's only a graduate teacher assistant, just to make it clear for people. I've not taught classes the way Tom has. Like that is way more involved. I will say I have taught classes. It's not that I've done nothing. Let's not make it less than this either. But the thing I always said to the teams of students I had was the worst thing I could hear coming out of their mouth is that's just how it is.
yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
I
It's
don't
like
want
yeah,
that defeat and that acceptance of what they
yeah.
meet, especially in the social world when we're looking critically at that. They should never come to me and say, and I ask them, so why do we brush our teeth twice a day? I don't want them to
Hmm.
say that's just how it is. I wanted to, get into okay, what might actually be the cultural reason for why we've
Yeah.
developed that habit of dental health
Hmm.
where we are. And the same
Exactly.
thing with
Yeah.
you. You don't want them to say, oh, that's just how they programmed it, or that's just how the game is. You want them to think about, well, okay, but is why is it like this? Why
Yeah.
do they want us to suspend belief that a being that's twice as hot as the sun can even stand on the ground? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I think that's incredible. I do have one challenge for you though, I think, because we are about to round off, and I sort of want to say this mainly because to bring us back to what we're both really interested in and share, other than video games, of course, and some rock music. But have you ever considered going to a tattoo convention and doing some maths, like at a tattoo convention?
If they would give me an audience, I would love to. So
Because I
like
think
where we met
I would be very
at
interested to see, for example, with how quickly the needle moves and stuff like that, the angles that penetrate skin. I think there would be some maps that would be
oh, undoubtedly, yeah, there's
there.
you can mathematically model anything. That's kind of again one
Oh,
of the
that
things I try and
you said
teach
it
when
now.
I'm talking about the maths of Pokemon is like I like maths, I like Pokemon, so I'm going to take my mathematical skills and apply them to Pokemon. I like football, so I apply maths to football. I like
Yeah, yeah.
Harry Potter, so I'm, doing a massive Harry, whatever. So yes, you can absolutely apply that kind of mathematical thinking and modeling to tattooing and to the instruments used to, yeah, like and you say like the pressure and the differences in the pressure and the
Oh,
surface area around
yeah.
like, the different size needles. There's going to be, because like the artists obviously they're not in their head doing these calculations.
No, no, no.
They are doing it through feel and through experience.
Yeah.
But obviously, in different areas of the body, different needle types, different skin types, different inks, they are applying different amounts of pressure all the time as they're tattooing.
It is.
And that to me is actually that's a really interesting maths problem. Like,
I
what are the
think if they knew
variables
you could
controlling
make it
this?
sound this cool and this awesome what they do in that way, they would absolutely want you to hold talks at every tattoo convention in the UK. They'll be like,
Yeah.
"Yes,
So,
Tom, come here, make us sound really fucking genius right now." I mean, they are
um,
absolutely brilliant at what they do. We just made it sound like they sit there and like, "Oh yes," like almost you almost made me think of a Sherlock Holmes, like Robert Downey
yeah, yeah,
Jr.
like the
moment, but
deductions.
with a
Yeah,
tattoo. Like,
absolutely. Well, no, that is again, and I say this when I talk about professional footballers taking penalty kicks, and I talk about the maths of where you should aim a penalty kick, and which players are good and bad. I'm not claiming any of those football players are doing maths in their head. It's
no,
just the same with tattooing, right? You learn it through practicing your craft through experience, but to me at least, it's really interesting, and I think you can learn from also thinking about it in the mathematical context, and then sort of, even if it just reaffirms the way you have been doing it
oh
through
yeah.
experience and through learned practice, it's nice to know that, like, the maths and the science are like, yes, so for this particular area of the body, you have to
You've
press
been
twice as
correct, sir.
hard because of X. So that why you're doing it, right? Like you say, it's instead of saying, oh, I always have to press harder when I'm tattooing someone's stomach. I don't know if this is true. I'm literally making this up, but let's go with
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Right? And the artist is like, the artist learns that from having tattooed people's stomachs, right?
Yeah.
But then, if you could have a scientific explanation, like you were saying, why do we brush our teeth? You figure it out. It's like saying, well, why do you have to press harder when you're tattooing someone's stomach?
Mm.
And then you're like, it's because of the thickness of the skin, and you could give a reason. I feel like that would actually be helpful knowledge for a tattoo artist.
I mean, it
Like, I'm
also
not saying it would
it
make
backs up
them
certain
better or
certain
yeah.
methodologies and all that stuff, and makes them more easily applicable sometimes. Not that you then have to have people do an equation or something, but when you
Yep.
back up one thing scientifically, it often makes it more easy to accept and implement and spread often. So absolutely, I think
Mhm.
it has way more useful, I mean, implications that people might at first think. Because I think a lot of people. I mean, you have picked one of the scariest topics for most of us in school.
But that's just because it's not. So I
Yeah,
genuinely love teachers and think they
yeah.
have the world's.
Same,
I
same.
could not teach. I could not teach in school.
Oh,
So like
no,
I
no.
cannot stress how much respect I have for teachers that can do this. But I think the way the math syllabus is designed, and that's the problem. The way that maths is presented in school, it's for the people that like it, fine, but people that don't, it feels very dry, very boring, very impenetrable. And
I
that's a
agree.
problem.
Because I
And
was
it's
one of the
things
people
like,
in school, I liked it. I liked maths and I liked that sort of stuff. So it was easy for me, but I remember when I think back, so many other kids are like, "Oh, I don't get why is this one?" And I think that's also a big difference, even though not at this level, but you do with students in. I mean, you teach quite a few different levels now, I imagine, but especially with undergrads, I think making it applicable to theirs, like we talked about, to their context and their world
yeah,
helps so much, especially with kids. Like, because you often hear people say, "How am I ever going to use this?" Well, if you actually, as a teacher, tell them how, it
exactly,
immediately
exactly.
becomes way more interesting and applicable to them.
Well, I would even go further and say you present it through its application.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
the
That's even
example I
better.
gave of, right, imagine you're teaching trigonometry, right, angles and side lengths of triangles, but you start it by saying, right, today we're all adventurers. You've just climbed this mountain. There's a mountain in the distance. We'd like to know how high it is. Right, if
Mm.
you just immediately paint that picture, right, you've got a class of
Absolutely.
kids who are like, oh my God, yes, like we need to figure out how high the
And
mountain is so we can go and climb it.
I mean, it almost
And then you
gamifies it, which
reveal,
always helps teaching as well.
yeah,
Like, it sort of gamifies it in a way. It's sort of makes like, yeah, okay, we're going. I think there was a guy I once heard about. I wish I knew who it was so I could just tell you it. Because I can't remember if we shared this level of nerdery, you and I, but there was a guy that once did it with Dungeons and Dragons I heard about, where he was like teaching maths, but just by
right.
playing D&D with students. I'm like, this is actually
That
quite
sounds
funny because there's
amazing.
already some
That
math in D&D,
sounds,
but if you get
yeah,
into
yeah,
it,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
sure there's way more. Like,
That sounds
it's
so
pretty
cool.
brilliant. Like, I bet
Yeah,
you
yeah,
would
yeah.
love that. I bet if you were
I
to
would.
play
I
D&D, it
absolutely
would
would.
be
Yeah.
with like a heavy math set. You would almost have to go back to the second edition so you could just do more maths instead of the easier fifth edition there is now, where it's like, oh yeah, we've streamlined this. You're like, no, no, don't streamline it.
Give me,
Give me
yeah,
the
yeah, make me
maths.
do the maths. Exactly. Yeah.
But
That was awesome.
Tom, it's been an awesome interview. And I mean, normally I would say let's end on on a light note, but we've already been giggling through the whole thing. So I mean, I think we've been through the light note already. But it is on an even lighter hearted note. I was wondering, do you have any tattoos planned at the moment?
I'm actually going to get tattooed tomorrow. So
Nice.
yes. Yeah, no, we are. What are we doing tomorrow? I'm getting a couple more Pokemon tattoos.
All right.
Um, to go in my leg with my other Pokemon. And I'm also getting some more flags added to my
Oh.
collection of
Well, I
flags.
mean, you
We're
did say you were
finally adding the
behind
new
on that
ones.
one.
Yeah, yeah.
I
There's
tell you
like
what, you keep
another.
a list
I
then, because you travel a
Yeah.
lot, so
Well,
it can be.
so I didn't originally, and then when I had the idea of the tattoo, I found a list of every country in the world, and then went through and was like, have I visited this
Ah,
country? And was trying to remember. But then obviously since the tattoo idea, now I have a note on my phone, and when I go somewhere new,
yeah.
I obviously add the name of the country.
Yeah, I think
So yeah,
that's a
we've
better
got
way because you can forget sometimes. Like,
yeah, and I can always just go back through the list and try and uh
yeah.
check and remember as well. Because I don't know, there's something about seeing, even if it's a non-memorable place or it was
Yeah.
very, very long ago, when you see
You
it
can
on a
say
list,
Denmark.
at
You
least for
you can say
me.
Denmark. You can say Denmark's not numeral.
No, I
Whatever.
like
We
Denmark.
all
I've been
know
to
it. No.
Denmark twice. I've been to Denmark twice. I went
Oh,
last year. Last year, yeah, d January 2023 was my last. I
that's
was there
before I moved
relatively
back.
recently.
Oh, that's before I moved
So
back. Damn.
yeah,
I don't get to be
yeah.
angry at you for not saying hi then if it's before I moved back.
We hadn't met yet. We met in May
No, that's
last year,
actually
so
true. We hadn't even met yet. We met in, was it
yeah,
May or was it March? I can't remember.
May last
May,
year.
yeah.
It was
So that's
May.
actually true.
Yeah,
That's actually 5 months before we met. So I can't at
there you
all
go.
be angry at
We
you for
could
not
have.
saying hi.
We may have walked past one another on the streets of Copenhagen. Who
No,
knows?
probably not. I was in Glasgow at the time. Right.
Let's keep it. Let's keep it. Let's pretend. Who
We'll
knows?
pretend. We'll pretend. We'll...
It's unlikely. It's unlikely, but who knows?
You'll be able to figure out exactly how unlikely, but that's a whole other equation,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be
yeah.
honest.
There you go.
Right.
That's the maths problem for the viewers.
Oh. Right, Tom, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. Like, it's
My
amazing to have
pleasure.
you on. It's been such a joy to interview for this. And I know it's probably unnecessary as people know you quite well by now. You have quite a big following as well. But do plug what you have going on.
Yeah, so just head to tomrocksmaths.com, my website. Everything goes there. And if you search either Tom Crawford or Tom Rocks Maths on Google, you'll find YouTube, and all of my social media is just at Tom Rocks Maths. So there'll be posts about tattoos, posts about me traveling and getting to visit awesome places and do maths talks, and obviously posts about various maths things that I'm finding interesting.
And as an add-on, the S is on purpose for any Americans and other people listening in.
Yeah, yeah, of course. So yeah,
It
it's
is
my
maths.
UK
It's not
roots. Yeah,
math.
yeah,
It
yeah,
is
yeah. Yes.
maths. Because
There is
we're
the S
speaking
on
in
the
a
end,
British
yes.
context here.
So I would just like to clarify, I am open to all interpretations and
Yes,
spellings of the word.
yes, yes, yes.
I
Right.
just prefer the one with S.
Yes, same, same. Right, to any viewers and listeners, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this awesome episode with Dr. Tom Crawford. It's always awesome to introduce people to these wild and wonderful, eccentric academics in all sorts of fields, this time in maths. I know some people refer that without an S, but since Tom is from Britain and that's why I've spent a lot of my time, we're going to do it with the S on, as we did in the episode. But it was absolutely wonderful having Tom on and talking about how the tattoos actually were just reaffirming how he already saw himself within his life and his academic career and everything, and how deep his love is for both tattooing and what he does as a mathematician and scientist in that way. Next time, we're going to be diving into a different area, which is also interesting to me, because I've not met many that work in this profession that have a lot of tattoos, but we're going to be talking to Skylar Gray, who is a former tattoo artist who's now become a realtor, I believe the term is, a real estate manager, where she basically finds people homes, so to speak. It's a poetic way of describing it, and helps them figure out how they can afford it, what they can buy, and it helps them find a suitable house or apartment or whatever it might be. But anyways, without giving too much away or without butchering what it is Skylar does, that's what we're going to be talking about next time for episode 34. But before that, and that's a little surprise for you guys if you're following along, for around New Year's Eve time, I have a New Year's special coming out where this time around I've let my idol, and nowadays I would venture to say friend, Beverly Yin Thompson, who's been on the podcast before, interview me about the podcast, where it's going in the future, where it's come from, and the book project I'm turning it into. So look out for that around New Year's Eve time, and I wish you all a great end of the year, and I hope you'll keep watching. Thank you for all the support, and I'll see you around.